Call up right now, W-E-E-D, baby.
It's
that Star Power mixtape. My man Wiz Khalifa. What up to the whole Taylor gang? Heavy hustle.
Definitely a down year for the Pac-12. I see maybe 4 to 5 teams that I really like. There's going to be a couple teams that, throughout conference play, they're going to look better and better, so it's going to make them look better. But this conference doesn't look very deep, and there's a lot of, good small teams on the West Coast when you talk about BYU, St. Mary's, Gonzaga, but they're not in the Pac-12 this year. But at the top tier, Arizona State is my top team. They have looked awesome. Their ability to shoot the ball, and the newcomers that they've had have really improved this team, has really made this team better. So last year, this team had Shannon Evans, Trey Holder, and Cody Justice, three of their key guys in the team this year. All those guys shoot threes. Holder's the point guard. Evans plays the 2. Cody Justice plays the 3. Cody Justice gets a lot of boards. Very good player. And then you talk about some of the newcomers that they have. Now, Romello White, he redshirted last year. He's came on and been awesome. Remy Martin, another freshman, he's came on and he's really made an impact as of lately. His coming out party was the Kansas game. And then Mickey Mitchell, who was a sophomore, he actually hasn't played a whole lot this year, but he was a key part of the Arizona game. He made some key plays. Arizona is a huge team. Arizona State's not a huge team. They had to bring somebody in there for some height, and that's what they decided to do. But Arizona State doesn't match up against Arizona very well. But I think Arizona State's probably a better team. That one was at Arizona. Arizona State barely lost. So I'm excited to see what happens with Arizona State this year. They're gonna, they're a team that lives by the 3 and dies by the 3. So that one week that they're not able to shoot the ball, they're probably gonna lose and get out of the tournament. But and they really didn't shoot the ball good against Arizona, but they were still in that game, which was pretty surprising. Now, Arizona has a really good team, a lot of firepower. When you talk about Raleigh Alkins and Alonzo Trier, Alkins was out for the first couple games of the year, but he's back now. Alonzo Trier and Raleigh Alkins are 2 really good players. And then you add DeAndre Ayton, who is an absolute animal. It's really hard for me to decide whether him, Brandon McCoy, or Mohamed Bambo or Marvin Bagley are the best. Marvin Bagley and DeAndre Ayton are definitely the best out of those 4. Brandon McCoy's close, and then Mohamed Bamba is just like a freak of nature athlete. He doesn't have that basketball skill set that the other 3 have at this point, but he's more of he has more work to be done. But DeAndre Ayton is a beast. He can step out and shoot. He can shoot the 3. He's really good at the mid-range. If you let him shoot the ball, he's probably going to make it, or he's going to take it at least. And then some of the other players that are good, Dusan Ristic. So you talk about 2 7-footers on this Arizona team. That's really hard to match up against. Keanu Pinter, another senior. Parker Jackson Cartwright, a guard who's a senior. All pretty good players there. And then some other guys that have came in. Ira Lee has been all right. Brandon Rudolph, Dylan Smith. All these guys have played at times this year. Emmanuel Acott, all these guys have played at times this year and have been impactful, and we'll see them throughout the year going forward. Now, talent-wise, USC is probably talent-wise the second best team in this conference, and it would probably be a pretty safe bet to say they're going to go pretty deep, but they have really struggled here to start the year. Now, they don't have DeAndre Melton. And Jonah Matthews has been out for a while. I don't know when DeAndre Melton's going to come back. Jonah Matthews should be back soon. But this team is deep, but at the same time, it struggles. And it shouldn't struggle the way it should. It should be a better shooting. They have basically a good player at every position. When you talk about at the 1, they have Jordan McLaughlin. At the 2, Shaquille Aaron. At the 3, Elijah Stewart. Or you can put either of those guys at the 3, the 2 or the 3, and then all good players. And then Benny Boatwright and Chemezi Mechu, those guys hold it down, 6'10 and 6'11 in the front court. Benny Boatwright can step out and shoot. He can drive. Benny Boatwright's probably the biggest NBA prospect type player on this team. DeAndre Melton's really good one too, but he's just he's a sophomore, hadn't played that much this year. And then Derek Thornton is a transfer from Duke, but I really hadn't seen a whole lot of him. I think he got hurt. I'm not real sure, but this is a good team on paper. They just don't really play that well. They struggled against Washington. I watched them lose to Princeton. They struggled against. I think they lost to Middle Tennessee. No, they beat Middle Tennessee. They almost lost to New Mexico State. New Mexico State's a really good team, though. But I don't know. I feel like, for them to have that much talent as they have, they should be better than that. So at 4, I've got UCLA. UCLA, to me, I thought that they would be better than they are. They're led by Aaron Holiday and Thomas Welsh. Those are their best players. And they've honestly had some good help from the freshmen. When you talk about Jalen Hands and Chris Wilkes, those two guys have had really good years for them so far. And then, Gorgie Galladay, Prince Ali have played good for them. They lost a couple of guys due to suspension after the little incident the first year. So this team's not real deep. But, Aaron Holiday and Thomas Welsh are mainly their whole team. So it's really hard when you have just two guys that you're going to get, an impact from night in and night out. It's really hard to, feel like that they're going to be a successful team. I think they make the tournament, but I don't see how deep they go in the tournament. That's what's tough for me. Oregon's going to be my next team. I think, Oregon's really struggled to start this year, but I think, I was disappointed in their first loss to Utah to start Pac-12 play. But this team's lost their entire starting lineup from last year. Peyton Pritchard's the main guy that's returning from the team before, and they do have good transfers and good freshmen. Don't get me wrong. Troy Brown, who's came in, who's a freshman from Las Vegas. He's a very good player, and he's going to be a very good player going forward. And he's just a freshman, though. You talk about some other guys that have transferred in. Paul White from Georgetown, he's actually hurt right now. Makai McIntosh from Illinois State, he's been really good. Elijah Brown has been good for a transfer from New Mexico. So, and then Kenny Wooten, who's a freshman, has started to come on in the last couple of weeks. So this is a very talented team. I think Dana Holtman will have this team better by the end of the year. I think they could creep into the tournament and get in if they play pretty solid throughout the year. Next team I'm going to talk about, I'm going to say Utah. Utah's a team that they just play real solid. They don't really have a ton of talent. But they're just real solid. Justin Bibbins transferred in from Long Beach State. He's played good since Pac-12 play has started. And then going into the year, David Collette to me was their best player, but he really hasn't made that much of an impact. Cedric Barfield has been inconsistent. Tony Ralston has played a good amount. I've seen him a good amount in. And then, their freshmen that they haven't really got to play. Brooks King hasn't played a lot. Chris Seeley, Donnie Tillman, they should be coming back soon, but they really hadn't got to play a whole lot. Washington, a little bit of a surprise. Now, one thing I'll say, Mike Hopkins is the coach now. He's a longtime assistant to Jim Boeheim at Syracuse, and he runs that 2-3 zone. And the Pac-12 doesn't really shoot the ball that well, and so they're able to stay in games. And they almost beat UCLA the other day. UCLA didn't really come to play. Washington's defense was really good, but then the second half just caught up to them, and Washington couldn't really score any points. When you talk about Washington, David Crisp and Matthias Steibel are some of their better players. Noah Dickerson, another one of their good players. And then Dominic Green's been hitting some threes lately. Sam Timmons comes in off the bench, or I think he might start. I've seen him play some. And the guys that, Jalen Noel is the main freshman that's been playing a good amount this year. That's been good for them. I think Washington's definitely overachieving so far at this point, and I don't think they make a tournament. I don't think they can make the tournament, but I think they're right on the cusp of maybe being a bubble. I think they're definitely a bubble team this year. Fighting for a spot. Oregon State, to me, they're not an awesome team, but they're a middle of the road Pac-12 team. They're not one of the worst, but they're definitely not in the upper echelon of it. Drew Ebank's a good big man for them, and then some other guys that are good for them is Stephen Thompson is probably their best player. His brother is also on the team, Ethan Thompson. He's a freshman, and then Trace Trinkle, the coach's son, is another good player. But this team just doesn't have a lot of depth other than those couple of guys that I mentioned. So it's tough for Oregon State to be successful, in a tough conference. But they are pretty good at home. They gave Utah all they could handle the other day, but Utah was able to beat them. Next team I'm talking about, Washington State. Washington State, a bit of a surprise. They're a team that's honestly supposed to be at the back of the pack. They surprised me in non-conference play. I think they had a win over Georgia. It might have been, or San Diego. I think they beat San Diego State, and I know they beat St. Mary's is the big key. They beat St. Mary's somehow. So they won that little tournament. Malachi Flynn's their best player. Another good player on the team, Robert Franks, is a good shooter. And then Drick Bernstein, who's hurt right now, transferred from North Dakota, pretty good player. This team is very young. Doesn't have a lot of depth. Vontae Daniels is another player that's all right. But I honestly think that this team is better than a couple of these other teams that have been honestly pretty sorry this year. And some teams that have been pretty sorry, Stanford's been sorry. Now, I know they haven't had Dorian Pickens, but they're returning a good amount of their guys from last year. And, Reed Travis is a beast. I thought they would be a little bit better, and they're really not. Michael Humphreys and Reed Travis, Dorian Pickens, these couple of guys are some pretty good players for them. But this team just hasn't panned out. They're projected to be a little bit better this year, and they're struggling. Robert Cartwright, another guy that's all right. And to finish off the Pac-12, the two worst teams, California. California is pretty bad. They have a couple good players, though, when you talk about Marcus Lee, the transfer from Kentucky, Don Coleman. Don Coleman's a real good player. He's a junior, a guard. Kingsley Orokwa, a senior. He was starting at the first year, but I think Marcus Lee starts now. And this is a big team. You would think this team wouldn't be as bad as they are. But they're not that good, and their best newcomer is Darius McNeil from Houston, freshman. He's had a couple of good games. Justice Suing, another freshman, he's been all right. Real young team. Grant Artisovic from Australia had a big three the other day, but just a young team. King Jones is the new coach here. I don't think this team's going to be too good this year. And then Colorado, I have Colorado. Colorado was supposed to be better, but they just look bad. This team, they have no depth. Losing, Xavier Johnson and Derek White, Josh Fortune, Wesley Gordon, losing those guys last year was huge. This wasn't that great of a team last year, but it's really not that great of a team this year. George King is the best player, and he really hasn't been that great. Dominique Collier, another good player. This is just not a very good team. And I kind of have them at the back of the pack. They just don't score a lot of points. They don't play very tough defense, and that just isn't really like a Tad Boyle's team. But yeah, Arizona State. They already had one good game this year. If you didn't get to watch that one, go back and check that one out. But I think Arizona State are definitely the best two teams in this conference. USC is a close third, but not in that first tier. And after that, it drops off a lot. UCLA is going to have a pretty good year because there's a lot of bad teams in the Pac-12. Oregon, if Oregon can get right, they're a team that could be pretty good. Utah, if they can stay above the bullshit, they can be pretty good. But those other teams really aren't that good. Washington could really make a stand if they can get above all that backpack. But there's a bunch of bad teams at the back of this, and you don't want to get stuck back there with them. And when I talk about that, I'm saying Oregon State, Colorado, California, Washington State, Stanford are all bad. You could even throw Washington in that category. So there's a lot of bad teams in the Pac-12 this year. Player of the year, I'm going. I'm gonna have to go Trey Holder. Trey Holder's been amazing this year. I think he'll be the player of the year. Best defensive player. That's a tough one. I'm I don't know. I'll probably go best defensive player. I'll probably go Aaron Holiday. Aaron Holiday is a pretty good defensive player. And then most underrated player. I would have to say Jordan McLaughlin is probably the most underrated player. He gets no love, and he's a really good player. And the newcomer of the year, definitely DeAndre Ayton of Arizona would probably be the newcomer.
I'm in the game to win some. She didn't want to roll with me until she seen a friend come. Bought the BMW, you know I got the Benz coming.